What's up guys, Kudou here. Bushiroad's newest TCG, Dragoborne, is now available to the public, and it's trying to shake up the TCG formula with dice, dragons, and tower defense of all things. So first things first, I'm going to teach you all how to play the game, and then I'll get on to my opinions. Let's start with the banners. The banners will act sort of like a summoning resource and also interact with your dice. Alongside your 3 banners, you'll be bringing 3 dice with you, and the dice have to match the color of the banners you're bringing. If you play Buddy Fight, then imagine them as flags, but they actually do something and you have 3 of them. And if you play a mana-based game, such as Magic the Gathering, then imagine them as 3 lands that start the game in play. Your banners don't necessarily dictate the type of deck that you have to play, so play whatever 3 you want, although it will be most helpful if you play banners with the same color as the cards in your deck. Next up are the most common cards you'll see, creatures. As you've probably guessed, the number in the top left is the creature's cost. It's how many cards you have to rest in your resource area in order to put this creature into play. One resource you rest has to be the same color as the creature you're trying to play, but other than that, they can be whatever color you want. You'll notice on the top right there's a small area with a dice block in it. There's a mechanic in the game that allows you to take a dice block and place it on top of a creature card, and I'll get into this a little more later, but just know that when you do come to this mechanic, this is where you place the dice block. The 2 numbers down here in the bottom left are, you guessed it, the creature's attack and endurance. Attack is, of course, how much damage this card deals, and endurance is how much damage this card can take before it's sent to the discard pile. Above it is the card's effect text, or sometimes flavor text if the character doesn't have an effect. And finally, the symbol on the bottom of the card shows you which nation this card comes from. This is important if this card is in your resource area because it shows you which color you get when you rest this card. For the time being, it's pretty easy to see which card is which color, but in the future, for promos and stuff, this could come in handy. Our last type of cards are spells. You'll again notice that the cost of the card is in the top left. Unless otherwise specified, spells can only be played during your turn and during the main phase. Below the card art is the card's actual effect. Apply the effect, and then put the card into the discard pile. There's a special symbol here too, but we'll talk about that in a second. And finally, spells can also become resources, so their nation is listed at the bottom of the card as a symbol as well. Sometimes creatures or spells will have the word ambush above their effect text. This means that instead of playing them on the field normally, you can just pay 2 generic resources, that means resources of any color, to put them face down on the field, and I'll show you where later. These cards remain face down on your side of the field and trigger under special conditions to do something special to your opponent. Sometimes spells that have ambush won't even have a cost in the top left. This means that they can only be played by ambushing and cannot be played through regular means. Finally, you'll notice that some abilities on some cards have a little black square with a yellow mark in them. If you've been following card games for a while, you might be aware of a little mechanic called shields. Shields are in different forms in different games, and this card game has them as well. Some cards can be put face down as shields, and the point of the game is to destroy all of your opponent's shields. And sometimes, if a shield is destroyed, and it has one of these little marks, then you get an effect. In layman's terms, it's a trigger. You perform the effect of the burst, and that's it. You ignore all other text on the card during this time. This will be your play area. I apologize in advance for the quality of the mat. I have to use the one that comes printed in the instruction manual, so there are going to be these really awkward colored boxes around some of the areas, but please bear with me on this one. Start the game by placing your deck in the deck area. Your deck should consist of 50 cards or more if you prefer, and it should not include your 3 banners. You can have up to 4 cards of each card name in your deck, and you can use cards that are not the same colors as your banners. It's all up to you. Place your 3 banners in these 3 areas marked at the bottom of your playmat. This area will also act as your resource area. Your 3 banners don't necessarily have to all 3 be different colors. In fact, it could be more beneficial to use 2 or even 3 of the same color, but we'll get into that later. You'll also need your 3 dice blocks. Don't forget, they should be the same colors as your 3 banners. Go ahead and set them to the side for now. With this, you should be ready to play. Also keep in mind that your banners will be face down during a regular match before the match actually begins. We just have them face up for now so we can see them. After deciding who goes first, draw 5 cards from the top of your deck. If there are any cards in your hand you don't like, you're free to put them back into the deck, shuffle, and draw the same amount of cards. Because you begin the game with 3 resources in play, you'll want to keep some 1 and 2 costs in your hand, just so you have a lot of stuff to play during your turn. Once you're happy with your hand, you'll want to take the top 2 cards of your deck and put them face down in each of your forts. The main point of the game is to destroy all of your opponent's forts on their side of the field. Once all of your forts are destroyed, then you're declared the loser of the game at the end of the turn. Placement actually matters in this game, and this is a good time to tell you that your banners cannot move for the rest of the game. Under normal conditions, this is where you would flip your banners face up and begin the game. Unfortunately, Bushiroad doesn't have a catchy phrase that you say at the beginning of the game like you have in most other games, so we're gonna have to come up with one on our own. I'm thinking, oh, got it. My tower is now erect! Oh. Actually, now that I think about it, yeah, maybe that's a bad idea. At the beginning of your turn, if you have any rested cards, that's cards turned horizontally, then stand them, that's turning them back up vertically. This shows that they're ready to be used once again. We'll say for this example that these were the numbers you rolled. Now draw 1 card from the top of your deck. You do this even if you're going first. After you draw your card, you can take the top card of your deck and put it face up in your resource area. Now this you have to skip if you're the player going first. Once you've done all of that, we can begin our main phase. There's a long list of stuff you can do during your main phase, but we'll look at them one by one. You can rest your resources to play creatures and spells from your hands. While a creature's on the board, you can move it around to any other fort you like. Creatures can only block attacks coming at forts that they're defending themselves, so choose wisely. Another neat thing you can do is start assigning those dice we rolled earlier. Dice can be used one of 2 ways, either as Drago shields or Drago crosses. Let's talk about Drago shielding first, since it's arguably the most important. You can Drago shield by taking 1 dice block and putting it in front of one of your forts. Remember earlier when I seemed to be making a pretty big deal about the color of your dice? Well, that's because a dice can only Drago shield at a fort where it shares a color. Let's say, for instance, that we didn't have any more cards at this fort, so this fort is considered destroyed. Well, Drago shielding here is now kinda useless because there's no longer anything we need to protect. In a case like this, it might be more beneficial to have another red banner so that we have another red fort that we could Drago shield at. For now, we do have fort cards though, so we'll just Drago shield here. So what does a Drago shield do exactly? Well, it pretty much acts like a 0 attack creature that can defend your fort. The number on the dice block shows how much endurance our dice block has, so if our opponent wants to get to our forts, it has to deal 2 damage to our Drago shield first. If our opponent were to do, say, 1 damage to our Drago shield, then we would move it down to 1 to show that the damage had been done. Again, it doesn't deal any damage back, but it is a nice way to protect your forts. Our other option is to Drago cross. You can Drago cross by putting the dice on the top right corner of one of your creatures. Creatures who are Drago crossed have +1/+1 to their attributes, regardless of what it says on the dice. A point of confusion is going to be that you get +1/+1 depending on what it says on the dice. For example, this 2 would make him +2/+2, but that is not the case. It is always +1/+1. The cool thing, though, is it doesn't really matter where you put this dice block, so you can even put it on a creature that isn't at a fort that shares its color. This is a good way to use your dice if there's no more places that you can use that dice to Drago shield at. Sometimes the color of the dice can matter though, like for this Carbuncle Imp for example. If he's Drago crossed with a red dice, then he gets an additional +2/+1, giving him overall a +3/+2, and for a 1 cast, that's not bad. So far, there aren't any real rules on how many times you can use a Drago cross on a creature, so if you wanted to put 2 or even 3 dice on one creature, then go for it. Just remember that each dice block is +1/+1 regardless of what the number is. Once you're done doing things in your main phase, you would normally move on to your combat phase, although the very first turn of the game doesn't include a combat phase. Since there's no combat phase, you would just end your turn. If you have more than 7 cards in your hand, then you discard down until you only have 7 left. And that's pretty much all there is to it without getting into combat. Let's say you end your turn and it goes to your opponent's turn, and I'll use your opponent's turn to explain combat. Let's say during your opponent's turn they attack you with a Sun Scale Sage. Your opponent now chooses which of the 3 forts they want to attack. You don't have summoning sickness in this game, so as soon as you summon a creature, you can attack with it on the same turn or use its activated abilities. If they attack this fort here, then they'll be going up against your Dragon Shield. Sunscale Sage has 3 attacks, so it would definitely be able to destroy the shield. Sunscale could choose to attack this fort here. You can then choose a creature at that fort to defend against the attack. Just rest your creature and battle will begin. In this case, your creature would take 3 damage equal to the Sunscale Sage's attack, and your opponent's Sunscale Sage would take 2 damage equal to your attack. Under normal circumstances, our creature would be destroyed and their creature would have 2 damage. However, our Executioner's pretty sneaky. He's got an effect called Deadly, meaning if he deals any damage to a creature, that creature is destroyed. This would mean that both creatures would be destroyed. You because your endurance reaches 0, and your opponent because of your effect. Our opponent's last choice would be this last fort here. And there's no Drago Shield, there's no creature defending it. These are the situations you're looking for, because there's nothing stopping you from destroying half of your opponent's fort. If the attack goes here, you're forced to just put one of those fort cards into your hand. Don't forget to check for a fort burst ability. This is when they would activate. Most shield bursts go to the discard pile after their effect is activated, but otherwise just put it in your hand. So that kinda sucked, huh? Wish there was something we were doing to defend that fort. This is where I want to talk about ambush. I could have done it during the main phase, but I think it's more important to talk about it during the battle phase, because this is where we can see them really take effect. A quick refresher on ambush, it's where you can pay 2 to put a face down card in front of one of your forts. Only cards with the ambush ability can do this, and they always cost 2 resources. Let's say we had this face down card ambushed here. This is a pretty good deterrent to keep our opponent from wanting to attack one of our forts. But let's say they attack anyway. Whoops, it's Death Trap. The creature you just attacked with is now destroyed. In a situation like this, where you have both an ambush and a Drago Shield up, the ambush would take place before the Drago Shield, unless you wanted to skip the ambush and just let it hit the shield. You can choose the order, but you don't want to let it destroy your Drago Shield, because by then it's too late to activate the ambush. Unless, of course, the card states otherwise. You could let it destroy the Drago Shield and then activate the ambush on the next attack if you wanted to, though. And that's pretty much the game in a nutshell without getting into too many specifics. So, what do I think of the game overall? Well, it's a fairly well-made game, and even though it's bringing to the table a lot of stuff we've seen before, it does make some improvements. One of the improvements I really like is you start the game with 3 resources in play, and they can all 3 be different colors, which makes it so 3-color decks are not only viable, but actually really consistent. But then again, if you want to run a 2-color deck, which is very traditional, then you actually get some benefits there too, because if you have 2 banners of the same color, then they can sort of exchange dice, or you could put 2 Drago Shields of the same color at 1 banner, so on and so forth. I like the idea that creatures can only block attacks coming at the fort that they're stationed at. It's something I've complained about in Kaijudo and Wish Cross and other games that use a shield mechanic, is that it doesn't really seem to matter what shield you take or what shield you attack, because it's just about whether or not you get a shield. But in this case, it actually kind of matters, because you want to go after forts that aren't protected, or if you all get to like the end of the game and there's only like 1 fort left that actually has cards on it, then you have to sort of play around a strategy that lets you get in and out and actually attack that specific fort, which is good. The art's kind of all over the place, but it's good for the most part. I'd say that like over half of it, over the half of the art is really good and well done. You can tell that they put some time and energy into polishing this game. It seems like it's in a very playable state. It doesn't seem like anything's too unbalanced right now, and it just seems like a well-made game overall. So that's a lot of positive stuff. It's a lot of positive stuff, and now we have to get to some reels. Hey Bushiroad, can I talk to you for a second? I've always considered you guys kind of the Nintendo of card game companies. You have companies like Konami who just do whatever they want to without actually regarding what their fans want. You have companies like Hasbro who make really cheap, awful card games quickly to make a quick dollar. You have companies like Cosplay Deviants who just steal other people's card games. And then, of course, you got big guys out there like the Pokemon Company. You've got your Wizards of the Coast, obviously. And they make these huge, high production value games, but they always seem to take a lot of elements from other things, or they seem to just be so simple that anybody can get into them, and they're just not that interesting after a couple of months. But over here at Bushiroad, Nintendo Inc., gameplay and innovation has always taken center stage. There's always been something really interesting going on in the setting, the world, the artwork, the anime that goes with the card game. Something about the gameplay clicks. It's unique, fun, fresh, interesting, pretty much every time. You know why Nintendo made Splatoon, Bushiroad? Nintendo made Splatoon instead of bringing over the latest Battlefield or Call of Duty or whatever, because rather than just go with this already established formula that's already proven to work but seems to get old and boring time and time again, even though it makes a lot of money, just isn't that interesting. Nintendo managed to make a game based on an idea that we already had, shooters, but add so much innovation and so much variety to the game that even people who hate Splatoon, hate Nintendo, know the name of Splatoon in Nintendo. Even if you don't like Splatoon at all, you know the name Splatoon. And you cannot argue, even if you hate the franchise with a passion, you absolutely cannot argue that it's like anything else on the market. You can't say that it's a copy of anything. You can't say that it's taking a bunch of ideas from something. Splatoon is its own thing. Weiss Schwarz is a pretty unique game. It's a pretty interesting premise. You take your favorite anime and you place it against other people's favorite anime or video games, if that's what they're into. And it leads to some pretty interesting scenarios. You could use Saber and Lancer from the Fate series to beat the crap out of the Lucky Star kids if you really want to. Heck, in the latest expansions, you can use Luke Skywalker to beat up the couple from Clannad if you didn't really like Clannad too much. It's unique. It's very interesting. It's got some very neat gameplay mechanics that I won't go into here. Vanguard. You've got your set based on religious symbols. You have a group of traveling circus performers. Heck, you could play a deck with a bunch of mermaids that are also Japanese pop stars. Okay, sure, whatever. That's very interesting. Buddy Fight is about dragons from outer space fighting against half-animal, half-robot abominations and magical skateboard-riding demons. Whew, oh, I need a second to breathe after saying that sentence. I want to say on behalf of the entire Bushiroad community that I am so sorry for what happened with Luck and Logic. The game's on its last legs, and honestly, it doesn't deserve it. It's a really good game, it's really well thought out, and I don't know why people don't like it more. It's a little more grounded than most other games, but it's still a really fun concept, and it was really well done. I'm not sorry about Ascendance of Aetheros, though. That game looks so boring. But back on track, okay? The point I'm trying to make is this, and I know a lot of you are wondering why I'm bringing all of this up. Bushiroad, what is this? What is this card right here? Why do we have goblins, red goblins, that deal incremental damage to creatures? Why do we have these black zombies here? Or black vampires? Black demons. Bushiroad, if I look in green, am I going to find creatures that increase my resource count, aka mana? What are we doing, Bushiroad? What are we doing? I think everybody pretty much gets the point I'm trying to make here. This game does fix a lot of the problems that I have in shield-based games, like Kaijudo. Kaijudo's a really good game. Kaijudo was sort of a break-off of Magic. It was Duel Masters, it was owned by Wizards of the Coast, broke off, became its own thing, and then was reborn later as Kaijudo. We've also seen the idea in games like Wish Cross, but that doesn't matter right now. It's a shield-breaking game, which is one of the most generic game types that you could possibly have of a card game, with, frankly, some of the most generic ideas for a card game I've ever seen. Of course, you've got resource gathering creatures in green. Of course, you've got creatures in black with death touch. Yeah, it's called deadly here, but it's still death touch, boys. Despite how well made this game is, it is seriously one of the most generic games that I've seen in a long time, and it's to this day, most generic thing that Bushiroad as a company has ever released. Ooh, I can feel the sourness coming from some of the people in my audience right now. And I know somebody out there is just dying to type out that Mike Elliott is actually helping develop this game. Kudou, you big dummy. There are people from Magic the Gathering help create the game. Of course it's gonna have elements from games like Magic the Gathering and Kaijudo. As if somehow I wasn't gonna know that Mike Elliott was involved in the game. My question is, why? Why on earth would they have to release something as generic and bland as this game? Your Bushiroad. If you absolutely had to do the Tolkien high fantasy setting, then why on earth wouldn't you change anything? Maybe blue could be goblins, okay? Maybe like goblin pirates, because the goblins have been living on an island, so now they know about sailing and all that kind of stuff. And maybe blue could be goblins, and you could still keep the drawing cards idea because they're looking for treasure. Maybe they could be really good at moving around the board. Maybe yellow or white could be orcs. Maybe, after so many years of bloodshed amongst each other, they've decided to unite the other races, and they're the ones who've stepped up to do it, okay? Maybe this time the orcs are actually, like, the level-minded good people. They could have the healing elements, because maybe they're orcs and they're really hard to take down, so, you know, they're just naturally good at healing themselves. Maybe things that prevent damage, because they're really diplomatic. Maybe instead of green, the elves could have been black. Maybe they've been living in the shadows of trees this entire time, so maybe they're just really good at dark magic, and maybe they're just really good at assassination. This took me about 45 seconds to think up. Did anything interesting cross anybody's mind when they were creating this game? You got 6 shields instead of 5. Great. Well, in a normal game, you would destroy 5 shields and then attack once more for game anyways. That's 6 attacks. It's 6 attacks for your game too. Creatures can only block on shields that they're stationed at. Cool. Keep innovating, but we're back to a mana system. It's just... What do you even say? What do I even say at this point? Is it just me? Am I the only one that's bothered by stuff like this? Oh, but Kudou, you're being awful hard on this game. You just said that the game fully functions. You're being a little too hard on the game for its aesthetics, okay? You like high fantasy, you like goblins and elves and swords and sorcery, so I don't really see what the big deal is. As long as the game's functional, right? You know what, you're right. It is a functional game. And you know what? If all you want is a functional game, good. Enjoy this game, because that's all they gave you. Kudou, you know, I don't really appreciate the sass. You know, it's just one card game. You don't have to play it, okay? If Dragoborne bothers you so much, just go play Vanguard or something. Let me explain something to you. If you truly care about somebody in a creative position, whether it be making music, games, TV shows, movies, whatever their creative outlet is, the absolute worst thing you can do to that person or company is to tell them that the work is good when their work isn't good. In its current state, the game is generic garbage, and it will fail. And that's what I'm really worried about. And this isn't just one game. We all know it's not just one game. How many people do you play Ascendance of Aetheros with? Okay? I bet there's a couple of you out there that play it, but it's not exactly a huge hit. How many of you out there still play Luck and Logic? Sure, again, might be a couple of you out there, but anime didn't do so well. Card game's not doing so well. Honestly, it as a franchise isn't doing so well. Bushiroad has just started pumping all of this money and time and effort into all these bullcrap projects that are just failing. And, you know, this is just the time that I think we need to call them out, because I think this is the lowest point that they've ever been. Their new IP is just generic blue, black, green, red, white, mana-based, destroy all of your opponent's shields. Just completely bland, utter nonsense. And the game will suffer and fail because of it. You had Mike Elliott, one of the big daddies over there at Wizards of the Coast, helping you on this game. You had all the time, you had all the hype, you had every tool you needed to make this card game succeed, and it will fail. By Christmas, there will be nobody playing this game. If there's still new sets coming out for this game 2 years from now, I will be unbelievably surprised. People will be hyped for this game for a couple of months. Everybody's going to want to try it because it's the newest Bushiroad game out there. It's got some really talented people from the Magic the Gathering team helping out. It uses dice. That's a pretty neat gimmick. Everybody's going to buy into this game for a couple of months, and then the game's going to fail. And quite frankly, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed for you guys. You guys think I like this? You think I like coming out here and just splattering all over Bushiroad's newest title like this that they were so hyped about? I don't. I really don't. I hope I'm wrong. I want 100% for me to be wrong about this. Okay? I want in a couple of months for me to make a new update video saying, holy cow, guys, I cannot believe I used to think Dragoborne was a lazy, not great game at all, okay? I can't even believe I ever thought that because they just released this new expansion and it is just so out there. I can't believe I ever doubted Bushiroad. It's not going to happen, okay? I'm not a negative Nancy. I'm not a negative person by design. I'm a pretty positive person, but I mean, I just can't. I can't this time. I will not be covering this game on my channel. Please don't ask me to cover this game. You know why? Because the entire point of my channel was to cover interesting card game content that you can't really see anywhere else. And this time, I cannot provide that using the content that Bushiroad's given me. This time, if Bushiroad wants an audience, it's gonna have to earn it. Whew, ladies and gentlemen, that was quite the tirade. I was not expecting it to go that long, nor was I expecting to get so angry, but there it is. Not going to edit out any of it. I think for the most part, it's pretty well deserved. If you enjoyed the video, please leave it a like. Those things really do help us out. If you didn't like the video, if you thought I was too negative, then leave it a dislike. Honestly, I want to know. Like, if you thought I was too harsh on them, then leave me that dislike and let me see what happens. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, or suggestions on what I should do next, then leave it in the comment section below. And finally, if you found this video by accident, then subscribe to stay up to date on the latest Kudou news. It'll help me recoup some of the subscribers I'm gonna lose after this video is released. Also, if you just really love me, then check out my Patreon in the description below to find out how you can vote on the content that I cover next. Until next time.